All right, for more on Paulo Sullivan's testimony, we are joined by crime and security expert, Professor Jacob Mofokeng, Unisa Professor of Politics, Prof. Dirk Kotzé, as well as legal expert, Advocate Mpilonhle Baloyi. A very good evening to all three of you, gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time and joining us today in unpacking what we saw as the start of the appearance of forensic investigator Paulo Sullivan. Perhaps, Prof, let's start with you, Prof. Mofokeng. We saw very early on in Paulo Sullivan's statement where he made a request not to be questioned on anything pre-1994. What did you make of that sort of request, and what outline does it give us with regards to the information that may have been contained before 1994?
Well, Katlego, it was a long, dramatic day in Parliament, and today's process was the so-called masterclass in high-stakes, legal theater, shifting between explosive accusation and personal defensive maneuvers. So a significant portion of the day was really wasted on a procedural deadlock where Mr. Sullivan refused to answer questions about his life before 1990, citing assassination threats. And the committee chair, Soviet Lakhanyane, firmly ruled against him, stating that as a witness, Mr. Sullivan cannot debate or dictate the terms of his interrogation. This set up a very tense day where, members of parliament were quite agitated. So for him to claim that he was not aware of the state of affairs in South Africa by that time where he visited, and he liked the weather as well as, everything around South Africa. So it seems to be, something that is questionable, and also for those at that time that, they saw him as someone who can, advance the interests of white people. So probably he was aware. And then for him also not to be aware of state of affairs and those things, I think he just want to play an ostrich where he put his head, in the sand. So, he tried, to show that, solely for him to come in South Africa, apart from business, it was to advance the interests of everyone, of which it's something that, is debatable, because he also, for the first time in a formal, he was addressed, he addressed the spy allegations, head on. He confirmed his triple citizenship, that of South Africa, UK, as well as Ireland, but insisted that he's a loyal South African who has spent 40 years fighting for the country's justice system, not a foreign power.
Prof. Kotzé, I mean, when we're speaking about those spy allegations, he starts off in explaining some of the work that he did previously in the early 70s in the UK, and that is working with counter-espionage. And when he was asked whether at the time he was aware that the ANC was listed as a terrorist organization in the UK, and he possibly could have been working as a spy against that, what did you think that line of questioning was trying to outline?
Well, I think, first of all, good evening, is that Mr. Paul O'Sullivan has been throughout his life, in South Africa at least, has been a very controversial person. Whether it, on whatever issue it is, he has taken up a position that's attracted controversy. I think what is, in this particular case, what he's trying to avoid, and for what is very sensitive, is to be seen as a foreign national who came to South Africa. It immediately raises issues about what was his intent to come to South Africa. The fact that he worked for British intelligence, that obviously create more questions. The fact that the British intelligence has been involved with many other intelligence services in the world, and there's lots being written about that, I think deepens the controversy about it. He wants to, today, I would say, in terms of his strategy, wanted to convince the committee that he's a truly South African, that although he's from being born outside South Africa, but he adopted South Africa as his country, and that what he did throughout his time in South Africa was to promote the interest of South Africa. So to go before 1990 obviously will complicate the matter, because if he worked then, for example, for the police of that time, that will turn this argument on its head, and will say, well, you actually try to work for both sides when it suits you. And that will undermine then obviously the credibility also of the evidence that you want to present to the committee. Some of them are, I think, we are going to see tomorrow, will be again quite controversial. And he must try to make himself as a person uncontroversial in order to be able to present that evidence. And I think so far he hasn't really succeeded in that.
Advocate Baloyi, I mean, Paul Sullivan did not really get through much of his testimony, quite an extensive piece of testimony that we are still to hear tomorrow. But from what you were able to pick up, how do you find the credibility of O'Sullivan as a witness?
Well, thank you. Credibility is not usually an issue of perception, but it's something that really needs to be tested. And today is the beginning of that. And the 2 days that have been allocated might not be enough in light of everything, including the introductory remarks about him wanting certain pieces of his evidence to be excluded, especially the evidence pre-1990. So it does put his evidence to question, and it does cast aspersion most of what he is going to say going forward, given the interaction of most of this morning and afternoon, because most of that was questioning his motives in South Africa and why were you here at that particular time. And as said before, that he spent most of the day trying to paint himself as this saint, this South Africa loving South African, and doing everything in the best interest of the country. Whereas even from the line of questioning of the evidence leader as well as the ad hoc committee members, they are very unsatisfied at the moment with the way he's going about his evidence.
So talking about that evidence, Prof. Mofokeng, I mean, he speaks of coming into the country as a tourist and as an investor. As you mentioned earlier, he loved the people, he loved the weather, and then he settled in South Africa. And upon settling, he got involved with the police, he served as a reservist, and then he went into training and assisting with recruits as well as reservists. What are the implications of these claims about this policing background and the role that he's played in policing, particularly in national security?
Well, Kato, he made submissions that some, individuals within the South African Police Service are appointed, to senior positions without, being qualified. But here, today he admitted not having, formal qualifications. So he explicitly told the ad hoc committee that he was not qualified to train anyone, also in the issues of constitution, around that 1990. He defended, his submissions, by arguing that at the time, around 1990s, there were no formal qualification requirements for such training roles, within, police reservist program. Remember, also the MPs questioned, his association, especially in the detective environment, to say, well, why will he be seen to be associated with certain, roles within the South African Police Service to such an extent that he will even be, awarded, awards for his, outstanding performance. So, he did make mention that he did what he called a self-preparation. He claimed he prepared himself for the role by sitting with a senior lawyer, to understand the Constitution, and later completed a trainer, vocational course to improve his instructional skills. What we have also noticed is when he's pressed to answer certain personal questions, he will try to divert such questions, but, he will play around not remembering certain things, but wherever he wants to make submission, he will have, that, excellent memory to be able to make such submissions. So the scale of training that he conducted, as he claimed, he claimed that he had lectured around police, in Houghton between 1993 and 2000, around 1,500 cohorts, of which then the name of, President Ramaphosa also appeared and characterizing him as a brilliant student. So, but that did not sit well with the MPs, because of that lack of qualifications and credentials where, Julius Malema, he questioned, Mr. Sullivan credibility.
Yeah.
So also the MPs pointed out that, his teaching the Constitution to those who actually wrote it, then it was something that is questionable. Hence, towards the end of the session, the MPs were very agitated in terms of how, Mr. Paulo Sullivan, successfully directed, the proceedings according to the way he wanted, not according to what he claimed before he came for the, for the sitting here. And I'm sure even most members of the public, then they will be disappointed in terms of, how the proceedings ended today. But it is what Advocate Baloyi indicated, that, well, a background was needed, so that we can be able to understand, where these things come from and his road, to the South African criminal justice system, lest, as what Professor Kotzé indicated, that he avoided also not to be seen to be someone who had, is a double agent or is someone who's playing double roles in UK as well as here. But so to say, he really directed whatever he wanted the way he wanted.
He most certainly did. And of course, there where you mentioned that he was training people on matters of the Constitution, the very people that drafted it, and he said it was simply on the Bill of Rights and not the entire Constitution, as it was something that needed to be included there. We do have a caller on the line, Jan from Hammanskraal. A very good evening to you. What are your thoughts on the evidence that was led today in the ad hoc committee?
Good evening, Kakeo. Well, the testimony that is going to be brought by Paul Sullivan, it might be today or tomorrow or for a couple of days. It will be the similar one of Brian Mohozi. It will be the similar one of Senzo Mchunu, the similar one of the EMPD boss, Mkhwanazi. All of them, they're going to rely on some lies, some technicals, and all of this sort of, they brought, say, Mkhwanazi might be involved, Fani Masemola is also involved, General Kumalo is also involved. It does not give sense for them to mention that all of those people that I've mentioned are involved in some criminal cartel. But they have waited until the 6th of July 2025 for the general to address such allegation. And throughout the whole and ad hoc committee, all those witnesses, they stand before the committee. It gives sense that there was actually a criminal cartel within the police service. So Paul Sullivan is going to play, he's a smart guy, he's not going to accept anything, he's going to play some technical games. I don't know, I was not there, I was not informed, whoever, all of those allegations that they were put forward before them, they're going to play the smart people. They're not going to accept it. So it's not going to make any difference, Paul Sullivan.
All right, Diane. Thank you for giving us a call, saying there that Paul Sullivan seems to be in the same group as Brown Mohozi, the minister on suspension, that is Senzo Mchunu, as well as Julius Mkhwanazi. We'll get a response from our panelists on that. We also have Budi in Somerset West. A very good evening to you.
Yeah, good evening. There's two problems. The biggest problem is that many of the committees, the parliamentary committee that's at the hearing, mostly are playing on their cell phones. They're not focusing, they're playing on their cell phones. That's number one. Number two, with Paul Sullivan, whoever is asking the questions is not asking the correct questions. No wonder he's studying his history. So you need to ask him what happened in the last 5 years in terms of the corruption.
All right, Buti, thank you so much for giving us your take. I'm sure there's still a lot that's going to come out of that testimony. As it was said, this is just the beginning of what he was giving as evidence. You can also give us a call or send us your WhatsApps and engage with us on this conversation. That WhatsApp line is 072-110-5584, or you can call us on 010-594-6010. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. We are speaking on Sullivan's testimony that took place at the ad hoc committee today. We are joined by crime and security expert, Professor Jacob Mofokeng, Unisa Professor of Politics, Prof. Dirk Kotzé, and legal expert, Advocate Mpilonhle Baloyi. So we had those callers before the break, gentlemen, and maybe let's come to you, Prof. Kotzé, with regards to Jan and Hammanskraal speaking about why the likes of Sullivan, Brown, Mogotsi, Minister Mkhunu, as well as Mkhwanazi, why they waited till the 6th of July to come and rebut some of the allegations that have been put out against them, and instead accusing the likes of the National Commissioner Masemola, as well as the Provincial Commissioner Mkhwanazi and General Khumalo, of wrongdoing, when in fact they could have also just taken up the platform to expose what they say is corruption on that other end?
Yes, that is a very valid question. I think in his case, you know, as I said in the beginning, he is such a controversial person, and he raises so many questions about, because, to be honest, to say it very sort of bluntly, he's not a member of the police service. But sometimes it looks as if he is actually right in the midst of them. So it raises serious questions about what, as a private investigator, how does he manage to have that type of access within the police? But then at the same time, it tries to be very independent in some instances. The Jackie Selebe case is I would say, one of the best examples of that. Aglioti also. But I think where it becomes problematic is that I'm not yet sure, if I look at the events in Parliament, where do they position him? Is he one of the persons that are possibly implicated like the other senior persons in the police, or is he a possible source of information? And with the way in which it is being approached in Parliament, it's completely unclear whether they are very critical of him as a person, but in terms of the role that he plays in in the investigations of the ad hoc committee, what is it that he can provide? Why did they want to have him in this position where he must give evidence to them, and why did they subpoena him in the end? So it wasn't his choice. It was something which it comes from the committee that they insisted that they want to have him understand there. I personally can't see yet what the committee tries to get out of him. What type of information is it that they want to know, which is going to contribute to understand or get more clarity on their terms of reference? Because it goes back to years, as we've said before 1990. Well, what General Konazi was talking about on the 6th of July is very recent. It is about events of the last few years. So I always questioned about what is the purpose of O'Sullivan's participation in these processes, except that he might have some information about the internal workings of the police that other people are not willing to talk about.
And I mean, just talking about those internal workings of the police, Advocate Baloyi, when we go back to Paul Sullivan, the police reservist, what legal implications arise from his claims regarding his qualifications and just the authority that he had to train police reservists and discuss constitutional matters?
Well, I think at the bottom of this, and what's very important is that we must bear in mind the whole purpose of this ad hoc committee, and this is to investigate the allegations that have been made by Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, and any information. So it's a fact-finding mission, and any witness subpoenaed there is expected to come and be frank with the committee and be forthcoming with information that will enable the ad hoc committee to go make remedial recommendations to Parliament. So in this regard, and showing that there are some loopholes within the SAPS itself, there would definitely be recommendations into SAPS internal processes and as to who gets appointed to which position under which qualifications, because that's the bulk of what became in question today on Paul O'Sullivan.
Prof. Mofokeng, when we speak about crime and security, how do the allegations of foreign intelligence just link with the impact on the integrity of South Africa's law enforcement system?
It's very much important that there should be direct lines in terms of information that has to be shared, either to the external role players, but as well as information concerning, the country, the structures within, security, and information such as that. But, coming to the person of interest today, Paul Sullivan, I'm of the view that, he's someone with a potent source, that within the South African Police Service and, and the state security agency, there are those career corps who are frustrated, by career, either political interference. And, we've got the so-called the shadow network, of which, Paul Sullivan carries a lot of information, where probably these officers leak dockets, phone records, and internal memos to him, because of his NGO. He's got the ability, to approach the court and forcing the disclosures of documents that will otherwise, not be allowed to the person of, of his caliber. So I think for that, it just posts that, or it provides with that kind of information where he will have information, dockets and quite sensitive information, because not only journalists, but also, police officials and people who feel like they are frustrated in terms of certain processes that will be taking place. And that, it puts the blurring lines between, the communication channel as well as what kind of information is supposed to be shared by either law enforcement agencies outside of South Africa. But with the question that you also asked earlier, we are aware that, he disputed, the submissions by General Mkhwanazi, probably, as other panelists indicated, that, he might have other information that we don't know, that at his disposal. But we have the challenge of business intelligence, hybrid in South Africa, where, unlike the police, he doesn't have to wait for a budget or a warrant to start an undercover operation. He can hire private surveillance teams, buy air tickets and witnesses, and pay for secure safe houses. So these are the dynamics that are confronting South African, criminal justice system currently.
Well, most certainly, and a lot that needs to be ironed out and unpacked at that parliamentary ad hoc committee. We've got Sanele in Mnambiti. A very good evening to you, Sanele. What are your thoughts this evening?
I need a greeting to your panelists. Just, I want us, the panelists, to just give us, to help me understand here. With this contestation of Paul Sullivan's affidavit, that paragraph 3, then where he's stipulating that he's not prepared to respond to any issues prior 1994, and so on, then when we compare that with what the ad hoc committee, in terms of reference, as they were from the July 6th of General Mkhwanazi, what is the problem there when Paul Sullivan is saying that he is not attached to what is happening before 1994, looking at the fact finding of the ad hoc committee? And again, why was it so easy for Paul Sullivan to drop President Cyril Ramaphosa's name here and then? What picture he's trying to give us?
All right. Thank you so much, Sanele, for your thoughts. In fact, maybe let's just bring in Prof. Dirk Kotzé. I mean, you answered it partially, Prof, earlier on with regards to that paragraph 3 of the affidavit and some of the associations that Paul Sullivan was trying perhaps to run away from. And that question around President Cyril Ramaphosa, I mean, he says he dropped his name, but what it really was there was with regards to him being one of the reservists that he trained at the time, because the president at the time, President Ramaphosa rather, was looking into getting some more information in order how they would be able to get information on the Bill of Rights and how to put together that constitution. How would you respond to Sanele, Prof?
Yes, I think for me the main point about this is that Mr. Sullivan, I guess he wants to demonstrate his loyalty. He wants, therefore, to build a sense of credibility, that he's seen as a credible witness, as a credible person in general, and that, for example, if he refers to President Ramaphosa, or if he refers to, that he was promoting the Constitution through the training purposes, it is to demonstrate his loyalty towards South Africa. So that is, in order for what he's presenting as his other evidence, that should be seen in a different light, not from a critical point of view, but rather from a person who embraced South Africa, and therefore whatever he did, it was in the interest of South Africa, not against the interest. And that is where his period before 1990 comes in, because if they can demonstrate that he was involved in some apartheid activities, that he was with the British intelligence, that he was actively involved in it, and that could have spilled over into South Africa, for example, that he cooperated with the South African intelligence during the period before 1990, that will obviously break down the credibility of what he is saying. And I think what he wants to, he sees himself as a type of a whistleblower throughout his life. And therefore he wants to say, well, what I want to present to Parliament is a form of whistleblowing, but if my credibility is undermined, it won't have the impact that I'm looking for that.
All right, let's hold it there, gentlemen, and take a quick break. When we come back, we will be wrapping up our conversation with the day one of Paul O'Sullivan's testimony at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are wrapping up our conversation about the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee and the evidence that was led there today by Paul O'Sullivan. So while we were speaking about some of that which has come out, Advocate Baloyi, what stood out today in Paul O'Sullivan's testimony was that position that he spoke of, in which he says was created specifically for him at AXA, him being the head of aviation, the group executive for aviation security at airports South Africa. What picture does this paint? I mean, he speaks about a meeting between the then Minister of Transport, Dula Omar, as well as the AXA chair, Romano, that had come together and discussed together with the board for such a position to be created for him. And he also emphasizes there that he did not have qualifications, particularly to aviation, though he had an engineering qualification with regards, I think it was an electrical engineering qualification. What picture does this paint with regards to not only interference, but just what could possibly be corruption very early on in our democracy that maybe has not really been shown in the way that we are seeing the spate of corruption currently?
Well, I don't think he anticipated that line of questioning, because it seems like he comes prepared to spill the beans and expose certain high-ranking officials. But the fingers are also pointing towards him and showing him that, look, you are not a special witness before the ad hoc committee. You are going to give evidence in a way that all other witnesses have come before and given evidence. But it also exposes the long-standing or the long existing rot in terms of corruption, the appointment of people without proper qualifications, etc. And as I've indicated, that at this point, fingers are pointing towards him, and I don't think that's what he anticipated when he came before the committee.
Prof. Mofokeng, I mean, even with that particular position, he speaks about how he hit the ground running when he got into the job, and there were a number of contracts that he started digging into, and he uncovered a lot of rampant corruption, stopped the contract of Kuselani Security, got other security companies to come and provide assistance there. What picture was painted for you with regards to his role at AXA during that time?
Well, Katara, he really put a lot of questions, for him. That's why, some commentators, highlighted, to say that, well, he came there at the ad hoc committee to be able to provide a particular picture, instead of, coming with, credible information. But, it was more of a praising him in terms of all the protocols that were broken, in terms of the requirements for individuals, to occupy such a high portfolio, as well as, him highlighting all the successes, so blowing his own horn. So it is something that probably tomorrow, then it will be part of the, cross-examination from the MPs, but also, his relationship between him and, Robert McBride, has been a central point of contention. Remember, he was also asked, why will he always have access to these high-ranking officials, including IPIT, where, he's alleged of, capturing the IPIT, of which then he said, well, he's always playing that part of innocence. But, he held a very strategic position at AXA, without qualifications, and hence then he's been seen to be someone who's trying to settle a score with Selebi, for Selebi to be able to put or maybe coerce or, put certain regulation to AXA to be able to, render him, redundant at that particular role. So we are looking forward then for tomorrow, where he will be then be asked in terms of the role he played within IPIT, and if not, whether he captured IPIT in terms of certain trends as well as, certain line of investigations that were directed at certain individuals, such as, General Pashan.
Most certainly. Prof, course, I mean, he also, just in line with what we're speaking about, mentioned the late National Commissioner, Jackie Selebi, and how he had asked him not to cancel that contract, and he alleges there that there seemed to be a friendship between Jackie Selebi and the owners of that contract. And he also mentioned some of those spy tapes. What political implications do you think there will be, especially now that he's now brought in back the issue of the spy tapes?
Yeah, I think that was a very interesting point, because it's, if one goes back to the time of the National Prosecuting Authority during the time of the end of President Mbeki, but especially during the time of President Zuma, it became highly controversial, very politicized, and it became, in a sense, one of the focus areas for what we now call state capture. So in that sense, the idea of how the criminal justice system and specifically the prosecuting authority have been infiltrated or disrupted by political decision making and appointments that were loyal to especially the supporters of President Zuma. I think that brings that back. And then the spy tape drama is very much central within that. So I think that is something which is going to be actually another topic to investigate. But whether there will be sufficient time for the ad hoc committee to do that, that is for me not clear. But I think a lot of questions will be unanswered after the session with him, and I think this is not what he wanted to achieve. He wanted to try to reach the point that after the 2 days, he would have cleared all the questions and he could walk away as not a controversial person at all. But I think the opposite is at the moment developing.
Advocate Baloyi, as we close this off, I mean, the whole process of both the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee and the Madlanga Commission is to look at the infiltration of political influence in many of the processes that happen in the criminal justice system. Do you believe, with what we are seeing and what has come out of both processes, that there will be legal frameworks, particularly from the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, that will assist in mitigating that interference?
It's difficult to say, and we can only desire that it should be the case that we see responsible people being brought to book, and if there's indeed criminal infiltration and interference, we should at the end of the day see successful prosecutions, because that's what we would like to see at the end of the day, proper convictions and people accounting and being punished for crimes that they've committed. But that also depends on the strength of the reports that the Madlanga Commission is going to give to the president, and as well as the recommendations that the ad hoc committee is going to give to Parliament, which is based on the credibility and strength of the evidence that which both parties would have had during these proceedings.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and for your inputs this evening. We certainly do appreciate it. We'll look forward to the start of tomorrow's proceedings at 10 a.m. sharp at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, as Paulo Sullivan will continue giving testimony, and that MPs will then start with their questioning from 11 o'clock promptly. Thank you so much for joining us. So that was crime and security expert Professor Jacob Mofokeng, the Unisa Professor of Politics, Prof. Dirk Kotzé, as well as a legal expert, Advocate Mpilonhle Baloyi. That's how